All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. So today, this video is going to be about how the Constitution got ratified and basically the issues that came up with it. There was something that was missing that some of the people didn't agree with, and that's what we're going to be talking about. And also a little bit about George Washington at the very, very end. Okay, so let's go to the objectives. So, again, analyze the process of how our Constitution is ratified and examine the differences between Federalist and Anti-Federalist. Okay, and again, like I've mentioned this before, that I'm trying to break up that thought that some people have that the fighting that's been going on in our country between Republicans and Democrats and stuff like that has only been going on for like 20, 30 years, things like that. When in reality, it's been a lot longer that two political groups have been bashing heads against one another. Um, and the thing is, the names have changed, but basically they still fought. And you're going to see here exactly what I mean. Okay, so here's your warm-up picture. So I believe on the form I put on there, what are two things that you see? Okay, so be sure you answer that. And then what do you think this artist is trying to say? So read what's written there and answer to the best of your ability. All right. So pause the video, because you guys are gonna be writing right now, uh, because we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. All right. So here's the thing. There was this group of people called the Federalist, right? Now these guys felt that we really messed up with the Articles of Confederation. And if you don't know what that is, you should really watch the previous video, because that was the one you guys are supposed to watch and learn about. Now, the thing is, the Articles of Confederation was very weak. And the thing is, it caused a lot of problems. So they felt, we need a strong government, because that was the problem with the Articles. It didn't give the government any teeth. They couldn't do anything. They couldn't even collect taxes from their own citizens. They couldn't make sure that people were following the national laws. So they needed some oomph. Okay, the kind of people who supported the Federalists were large property owners, merchants, artists from like big cities. Again, you have to remember back then, and farmers who traded internationally, who traded overseas. Not just farmers who sold things to other colonies and stuff like that. No, we're talking to Spain, to France, to England, to Belgium, things like that. Those people were primarily Federalists, not all, but a large portion of them. Then on the flip side, you have a group who felt, we do need a government that is strong, that is powerful, but it should not be all powerful. Okay, it should not be like so powerful that it tramples on the rights of citizens and tramples on the rights of states. So this group, they became known as the Anti-Federalist. Okay, so you got Federalist and Anti-Federalist. All right. The Anti-Federalists, their main focus was on the idea that there is no Bill of Rights. All right, there's nothing on paper that says this is your rights as a citizen. Okay, now as you can see on the bottom, I put poll question because that was the time I asked you guys if you knew who these guys were: Hamilton, Madison, Jay, George Mason, Patrick Henry, Samuel Adams. We did that in class, so you don't have to worry about that. Okay. All right, so here's the tail of the tape type of thing. Federalists wrote 85 essays to kind of support the new Constitution, basically talk about how good it is and how it solves basically all the problems that the Articles of Confederation created. right? They're like, this thing was bad, but this new constitution is going to fix it. It's going to do this. Yeah, the government couldn't collect taxes. This is how this constitution is going to give the government power and teeth to do it. Um, you know, people didn't follow the national laws. Now they're going to have to because this and that. So they basically felt that the Constitution already limited the government on power, what they can and cannot do. So why do we need to put on paper what citizens' rights are? And if you do that, where is it at end? You have to say they can do this, they can do this, they can do this, they can't do this, they can do this, they can do this. And that list would be huge. So people who were Federalist, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, John Jay, future Secretary of Treasury, future President, and the first Supreme Court Justice were Federalist. Okay. The Anti-Federalists, one of their biggest things that they had in common was that they opposed slavery. Okay, they didn't like slavery. And the thing is, they were like, slavery is still existing in the new Constitution. Yeah, we did this 3/5 compromise. Yeah, we don't like it. But we had to do it to get this thing going. They felt that the states would lose power to the Constitution, that the federal government would be too powerful. And then, of course, they pointed out there's no Bill of Rights. There's nothing on there that says this is your right as a citizen. Okay, another thing too you can say is that they didn't trust the federal government. So by saying, oh yeah, you have that right. Okay, but we want it on paper. Because it's easy to say, yeah, you have this right, you have this, and but who's to say down the line they might take that right away, saying, oh well, it's not on paper, so how do you have that right? No one said it. Do you see any documents that says you have that right? So they wanted clear-cut proof that this is your rights as a citizen. So famous anti-federalists were Patrick Henry, Samuel Adams, John Hancock, George Mason. All right, now I believe I put on the paper, write down the difference between the Federalists and Anti-Federalists. So if you did not take notes, or you just listened to it but you kind of forgot now, I would pause the video, go back, look at that tail of the tape, look back to that other slide before that, and basically write down the difference between the two. Okay, so pause the video, go ahead and do that, and we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. So here's the thing. Massachusetts was very much anti-federalist because, again, they were against slavery. Huge. I mean, really, really against slavery. Now, the Federalists who were in Massachusetts were like, okay, how about this? Let's make a deal. Let's say you ratify the Constitution and we promise we'll add a Bill of Rights to it. It was that promise is what basically made them go, okay. Now, here's the thing you have to remember. Back then, those big towns were actually pretty small. All right, they weren't like what our big cities are now, like LA, San Francisco, Chicago, New York. They were actually pretty small, but back then they were huge. I mean, you have a town of 5,000 people? Oh my God. So, or 10,000, oh my God, that's a big town. Now it's kind of like 10,000, that's okay size. I mean, nothing big, but back then that was huge. But the thing is, it's like this. In your city, have you ever ran into your mayor, a councilman, things like that? Chances are you may not have. But back then, you did. You ran into your mayor, you ran into your councilman, so you could talk to them and stuff like that. And the thing is, back then your word was your bond, really. Nowadays, people make promises, but they break them like crazy. Yeah, I promise you, I'll pay you back next Tuesday. Yeah, I promise I'll do this or that. Yeah, I'll help you out this weekend, I promise. And they don't. Okay, now it's not gonna ask the class, you know, can you trust people nowadays? Some people you say, yeah, I can. Some people you gotta say no. Some of you guys say it depends on the person who is ever asking. You know, so but back then people knew. Oh yeah, that guy broke his promises. All he did breaks his promises. So if he's asking for money, don't lend him any. If he's like, oh well, you can trust me, no, you can't. So that went a long way. Your word. So when you said something and made a promise, you better keep it. Okay. 1791. The adoption of the first 10 amendments became known as the Bill of Rights. That is going to be a question on your test. Okay? So I don't know how I'm going to phrase it, but that's going to be on your test. So with that being said, with the promises being kept, Maryland ratifies the Constitution, then South Carolina, then New Hampshire. So now they have officially the number to get it approved, but the thing is they don't have the population. All right, they still need that 2/3 population, and the thing is, New York and Virginia has about 30% of the nation's population in those two states. So for every 10 person, 3 of them live in either New York or Virginia, and they had not ratified the Constitution. So at the Virginia Convention on June 1788, George Washington and James Madison go in and they give a strong argument about ratification. Now here's the thing. George Washington is well-loved, well-respected person. Not just because he was the commander of the Continental Army in the Revolutionary War, things like that. It's that he was like our nation's like hero. He was the guy people loved and respected, and they looked up to him. He had the myths already about him about chopping down the cherry tree, that kind of stuff. But the thing is, when he said something, people listened with both ears, and they took it at his word. James Madison, on the other hand, people did trust him, but not all people. Especially the AntiFederalist people. So when he said, yes, I promise we're going to add a Bill of Rights, there's some, Anti-Federalists who were like, I don't trust him. He gives us his word, but so it barely passed, right? And Virginia, ratifies the Constitution. Now, personally, I think if Washington had made that promise, it would have been a higher percentage, 70, 80, 90% passing. Because again, George Washington had that charisma, he had that political clout, he had that connection with the people that they just, okay, we trust you. So, but that's just, again, my personal historical opinion. Now, here's the thing. In New York, 2/3 of the convention members were anti-federalist, and there's 2 guys who were there, who basically were on the Federalists, who were trying to persuade them to pass it, and that was Alexander Hamilton and John Jay. These 2 guys had like silver tongues. These guys could talk. They knew how to talk to people, negotiate, things like that. But really what they needed to do was stop the vote. Because if New York was going to vote right there and then, it wouldn't have passed. So what happened was the Alexander Hamilton and John Jay delayed the vote until New Hampshire and Virginia basically ratified the Constitution. So as that's going on in Virginia and New Hampshire, there's talk about from the Federalists basically saying, you know what, if this doesn't get ratified, we are going to be independent. New York is going to be independent from the rest of the nation. I've had some students ask me in the past, is that possible? Can that happen? Yes. We are called the United States, not the United by Law States. There's nothing holding us together. Okay, it's there's nothing legally holding us together. Excuse me, I'm so sorry about that. This is something that we, as the United States, we believe in the the idea of our country, things like that. We're bound together by basically by our love for our country, things like that. Um, but we can separate. Back in 2008, when uh, President Obama was elected, the uh, the governor of Texas basically said, "We're going to secede," which means separate. We're going to secede from the United States because we think that we don't like this president, even though he hadn't taken office yet. That we're going to separate from the United States, and this and that. They never did. Okay, but it has happened where states have left the United States and formed their own country, and that's what New York was prepared to do. But they did the vote, the Constitution got ratified, and they didn't separate. So here's my question to you: New York, let's say they separated from the country. Do you think they would be as big or as popular as they are right now? Because you have to remember, New York is like a hub to the world for fashion, pop culture, um, financial stuff. The United Nations, where all the nations send their representatives, they go to New York. Um, so, do you think that they would be as big or as popular if they had separated, become their own, country and things like that? And why do you think this? Yes or no, and why? Okay, so think about that. And then the second question is this to you: if a state decides to be independent, let's say California became independent, separated, do you think that they should be allowed to return? Let's say they separate and they're like, this was a bad idea, we shouldn't do that. Do we want to come back? Should they be allowed to come back? So what do you think? Okay, and why do you think that? So pause the video, answer the questions, and then get ready because we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. All right, now here's the thing. Only 2 states remain from not ratifying the Constitution. That was Rhode Island and North Carolina. Here's the problem. How can we call ourselves the United States when there's 2 states who basically are like, we don't agree to it? So the Confederation Congress sent delegates to those states and talked to them and basically told them, it's hard to say we're in the United States if you two don't agree to it. So North Carolina ratifies it, and I believe Rhode Island is the last state to ratify the Constitution. All right, a very important day in U.S. history, March 4th, 1789. That's the first time our Congress meets. Okay, so everyone's kind of happy, like, hey, this is great, this is our first day, things like that. So the new government is set, Congress has met, but there's still growing fear amongst the American people. And even some politicians, because the thing is, there's no guarantee that this Constitution will work. There's nothing to say this is absolutely going to work. Now we look at it and go, okay, yeah, it was going to work. But back then they had no idea. And you have to remember, the American people are thinking this stuff in their head at this time. Let's say it fails. The guys who wrote that Articles of Confederation, the first thing that really bombed, are basically the same type of guys who wrote this one. So if we start a new, type of declaration, new type of constitution, who's going to write it? These guys? They already failed twice. So who's going to step up and take these guys' spots? And these are the guys that we admire, we look up to. Washington, Jefferson, Hamilton, Franklin, things like that. These people, and they failed us again. So the confidence people had was pretty shaky. But the only real reason why they put some faith into it is because of their first president, who was George Washington. Basically, the Federalists wanted him as president, the Anti-Federalists wanted him as president, and they both were just like telling him, pick our side. Pick being an Anti-Federalist, pick being a Federalist. And Washington's like, no. Because here's the thing. You guys both like me. So if I choose one side, I'm only making the other side upset. So why would I do that? That's stupid. So he is like the only president to not have an affiliation to a political party. All right. And it's Washington's the one who tells the people, look guys, I understand you're scared. I get it. But let's give this a try. Actually try to work with us. Don't try to sabotage this thing. If it fails, it fails because it sucked. Okay? It shouldn't fail because you or some of your friends or people, a group of you guys purposely try to make this fail. Okay? Let's let the thing go, and if it succeeds, awesome, great, amazing, it succeeds. But if it fails because there's something wrong with it, and that will let us know next time this is what we're going to fix. Okay? Or how can we address this issue and fix it so that we won't have to, toss everything out. All right, so here's your next question. Do you think there will ever be a person who practically the whole nation wants to be as president? So again, remember, people loved Washington. They were like, really, there's nobody else who should be president except Washington. Like John Adams got some votes, and James Monroe and Thomas Jefferson, they got some votes, but overwhelmingly the people wanted George Washington. So that's what happened. Okay, now I'm asking you, do you think there will ever be a person whom Republicans and Democrats will both want and like, that they will basically be like Washington, be like, we're going to vote for you. Even though you're not this side or this side, you're awesome and we want you to be president. Do you think that will ever happen again? Or do you think there was like a one-time thing and we were lucky to have that? So go ahead, write it out. What do you think? Take some time to really think about it. Could we ever get to that point again? So we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. All right, so here are your exit ticket questions. Okay, remember, do not write down, one thing I learned today was, that's not the question. These are the questions. All right. What was the process and what was missing to getting our Constitution ratified? So how did it happen that they got our Constitution ratified, and what was missing? The second thing is, what are two differences between Federalist and Anti-Federalist? All right, so if you need to pause the video and go back, do it. Okay, but other than that, that's it for this lesson. So hopefully you learned something new. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And make sure you hit the submit button. Okay, and I'll see you guys later. All right, so take care, be safe.